Philip Hargrove, aged 45, slid the envelope onto the dining table amidst the mashed potatoes and bread basket, strategically positioned it for his parents, sister, and brother-in-law to see. He'd meticulously planned this move, rehearsing it, coordinating every detail, including the audience and the meal timing. And he was smiling. As a forensic accountant in Phoenix, Arizona, a city known for its scorching summer heat that softens asphalt, vibrant sunsets, and financial crimes as fiery as its climate, he spent the last 19 years untangling complex cases. I've spent close to 20 years honing skills to unearth secrets people buried, to trace clues intentionally left unfinished, and to decipher numbers that reveal a person's covert activities. I'm adept at reading numbers, at spotting deceit hidden within 6 layers of data. I can recognize signs of concealment and the false sense of impunity. That's why I noticed when my wife, Renata, began to conceal things. I've always been observant, but let me start from the beginning. Before I share what transpired at that dining table, before I describe the contents of the gift I returned to her and its impact on her expression in front of those she believed were allies, I must take you back to the genesis. To the morning when I realized the woman I had constructed my entire adult life with had transformed into a stranger wearing a familiar visage. This narrative isn't solely about divorce. It delves into the consequences when a person, known for unearthing secrets, finds himself scrutinizing the one he considered his world's confidant. It discusses the costs and the returns of such an ordeal. If such narratives resonate with you, if there's been a moment when the person you believed to know intimately seemed like a stranger, click subscribe immediately. Share in the comments below your experiences of being betrayed by a trusted one, as you won't be alone. Many have faced similar trials. This story will demonstrate that maintaining composure, using intelligence, and staying proactive aren't just feasible. They are the keys to turning everything around. Click like if you're intrigued by the idea of a forensic accountant applying his professional skills to his own marital issues, as this investigation is as meticulous as one would expect. 22 years ago, Renata and I crossed paths at a charity event for the Phoenix Children's Hospital. My colleague had compelled me to attend, believing it beneficial for business, and I had intended to depart within 45 minutes. However, she thwarted my plan without any intention on her part. She was employed as a development coordinator for a local nonprofit, gracefully navigating the crowd with an air of natural assurance that remains elusive for me to fully articulate. Her hair was dark, her eyes brown and radiant like they were collecting light, and she possessed a laugh that filled spaces effortlessly. That evening, she donned a deep burgundy dress, exuding an aura of familiarity with such grand events, despite it being merely her second time attending this specific gala. She executed expertise so flawlessly it felt like perfection itself, leaving me spellbound. I requested her to dance, and she consented with the discerning gaze I would later come to recognize over the ensuing 2 decades. A few years passed, and I escorted her down an aisle under twinkling lights hanging between ancient olive trees in the courtyard of Hermosa Inn in Paradise Valley, where her parents wept in the front row, and my mother confided in a stranger that I had at last achieved something right. Life in Scottsdale, residing in a house on the northern side of the city, complete with a pool in the backyard and a camelback mountain view through the kitchen window, which changed to shades of pink and gold daily around 6 o'clock. Renata progressed to become the executive director of a nonprofit aiding homeless families across the East Valley, excelling remarkably at her role. She possessed a knack for making the overlooked feel acknowledged, a skill at translating human requirements into institutional responses, and a tolerance for bureaucracy, donors, and community politics that I observed with sincere admiration. I expanded my forensic accounting practice from a solo venture in an office space near Tempe Marketplace to a team of 7, with active contracts spanning Arizona, New Mexico, and Colorado. My area of expertise lay in detecting financial fraud, tracing money through the intricate structures of concealment constructed by those trying to hide what they've misappropriated. Over 19 years, I handled cases ranging from corporate embezzlement to insurance fraud, real estate scams, and numerous other types. I testified as an expert witness in 14 federal trials without any of my evidence ever being successfully contested. We weren't ostentatious individuals. We didn't require it. For 2 decades, we constructed our home, vista, and lifestyle honestly and diligently, and I appreciated every element of it. We opted not to have children, a decision made when we were young, driven by ambition and certain the timing would align, later becoming an unchangeable reality in its slow, heartbreaking fashion. 2 rounds of IVF ended in loss, leading us to decide that further attempts could disintegrate our resilience. We found contentment in each other for a prolonged period. The first indication of change surfaced 14 months before the meal. Reflecting honestly, as I do when scrutinizing others' records, the signs may have appeared earlier than that. I had chosen not to acknowledge them. Renata's warmth, physical, emotional, and ambient, had been a constant, making those around her feel more comfortable. This warmth didn't vanish abruptly. Instead, it ebbed away, just as the tide recedes gradually over a level beach, leaving you unaware until you stand on dry sand, pondering when the water ceased to touch your feet. She began working later hours without me initially questioning it. The nonprofit sector operates on limited resources and individuals who go beyond what they receive. I had witnessed Renata pushing herself to exhaustion often enough to understand that late nights weren't out of the ordinary in her field. But then these late nights transformed into a routine, one with a distinct pattern and rhythm, particularly on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which I began to recognize as familiar as an unnamed melody heard somewhere before. She returned home on those evenings with an unusual quietness, not the weary silence of someone who worked late on grant proposals and fiscal plans, but a different, secretive quiet that lingered in her gaze. I observed this change, yet remained silent. Then there was her phone. Renata and I weren't the type of couple to pry into each other's devices. Our marriage was built upon trust that we had cultivated over many years and maintained effortlessly, like a well-oiled machine that doesn't require constant inspection because it functions smoothly. However, at some indeterminable point, she started guarding her phone in an unexpected way. Face down on the countertop during meals, screen hidden during dinner, password updated to one I had never used and never needed to access her messages. Every time without fail, I'm taken into the bathroom. I observed but remained silent. As a person who acts only after gathering all necessary information, I see reacting without knowledge as the most perilous act in my profession. Exposing your hand, alarming the subject, losing the chance to document, these are risks I avoid. Over 19 years, I've trained myself to suppress immediate reactions and embrace the patience of observation, recording, and understanding. This self-control held even in personal situations where my instincts rebelled. However, everything altered on a late November Wednesday morning. Renata departed early for a board meeting in Tempe, leaving me alone at the kitchen island, sipping coffee and engrossed in my own laptop screen. Her computer, placed beside mine, chimed with an incoming email. The screen was still active, and without touching it, I could see the email preview. The sender's name was Trevor Elmore. A recognition sparked in me. Trevor Elmore held the position of the new Chief Development Officer at a regional foundation, collaborating with Renata's nonprofit on a significant community health project. We had crossed paths twice before. Approaching 38 years old, he carried an imposing stature, broad-shouldered, exuding self-care in his presentation, and possessing the type of professional demeanor that conveyed warmth during networking encounters yet bore no weight outside such settings. Both times we met, he firmly gripped my hand, maintained steady eye contact, and smiled as if my presence brought him genuine pleasure. The message's teaser read, "Last night meant everything," but I opted not to delve deeper just yet. I spent a considerable amount of time at the kitchen island, my coffee growing cold as I pondered over the unread message. From the window, Camelback Mountain continued its usual routine, its silhouette remaining unchanged at that hour. In the morning light, the unchanging sight from the same window I've gazed at for 22 years appeared before me. Upon seeing something unexpected, as my profession has prepared me, I didn't react immediately but instead reached for my phone to call my attorney, David Kincaid. For decades, we've known each other through our mutual volunteer work at a downtown Phoenix legal aid clinic and subsequent law practices. A pillar of stability in the Phoenix metro area family and asset law scene, he has spent 30 years in the field, and I trust his judgment more than most. Upon informing him about my discovery that morning, his tone remained the calm, composed demeanor typical of our critical conversations. "Philip," he said, "before taking any action, I need to understand the situation fully. I require details about what you're facing." I aim to introduce you to an individual who can assist us in accurately recording these matters prior to any decisions being made. This is indeed the proper approach. In a different scenario, I would express similar sentiments. Upon hearing this, I responded that was exactly my intention. I simply wanted to keep you informed that we were commencing the process. Over the ensuing 6 weeks, I employed the meticulousness and fortitude instilled in me by 19 years in forensic accounting, scrutinizing every shared financial document at my disposal. This included joint checking accounts, savings, our long-term retirement fund, credit card statements, travel expenses, and bank activity cross-referenced with calendar entries. I also enlisted the help of a trusted colleague, a forensic financial specialist, whom I had collaborated with on a corporate fraud case in Tucson 2 years ago. I made her aware of my objectives and rationale, and she promptly got to work, understanding the nature of the task at hand. During the 6-week span, I discovered findings that were both exceeding and falling short of my predictions. My relationship with Trevor Elmore had spanned around 8 months. The evidence presented was transparent, uniform, and incriminating. Hotel bills in Tempe and Chandler, strategically positioned near her nonprofit's headquarters to seem reasonable if questioned about the location. 2 distinct dining charges at a restaurant in downtown Scottsdale, which she had informed me were nonprofit board meetings on those nights. A charge from a jewelry store on South Mill Avenue in Tempe. A silver bracelet that had surfaced on her wrist approximately 4 months earlier, which she had claimed was a token of gratitude from an exceptionally generous board member. I had accepted this explanation at face value when she shared it. I had scrutinized the bracelet adorning her wrist and fully trusted her account. The recollection of that moment, nestled amidst the evidence I was now organizing, was a unique sort of agony. However, despite the destruction it caused, the situation wasn't merely destructive. What continually drew me back to the financial records was the secondary figures. 4 months prior to the email notification on her laptop, Renata had been discreetly transferring funds, not through grand, conspicuous transfers that would have set off alarms or immediate suspicions. She was too astute for that. Small withdrawals from our combined savings and money market accounts were gradually moved via a series of layered transactions into an account established before our marriage, which I had no access to. The amounts varied between $500 and $1,200 per transaction, strategically kept below the amount typically flagged as significant in standard banking surveillance. Over the course of 16 transactions spanning 4 months, the total accumulated to $42,315. I spent a considerable amount of time contemplating that figure. $42,000 was meticulously moved over a period of 4 months, with careful transaction sizing intended to evade detection. This wasn't hasty, it was calculated. For 4 months prior to handing me the envelope at dinner, my wife, with whom I had shared a bed for 22 years, had meticulously orchestrated her departure. This wasn't panic, but calculated strategy, carefully laid weeks, if not months, before its execution. She had weighed the risks and devised countermeasures. It was not the hasty maneuver of someone fearing an unforeseen circumstance, but a pre-planned architectural move. The woman I called my wife had been secretly preparing to manipulate our joint finances in her favor before the divorce proceedings even commenced. As a forensic accountant, I am well acquainted with this tactic. It's a common ploy in corporate fraud cases, business disputes, and estate litigation. The initiating party often makes a deliberate pre-divorce transfer of assets to gain a financial advantage before the divorce is official, counting on the other party being unaware of where to look. She wasn't acting out of malice, but she was blind to who her actions were hurting. The meticulous planning ensuing involved verifying and properly preserving each document collected. David Kincaid assessed the situation comprehensively and introduced me to 2 more experts, one specialized in Arizona-specific marital asset law, another proficient in presenting forensic financial evidence in family court trials. My forensic counterpart finalized her report. All materials were systematically organized into clearly labeled documentation suitable for any level of examination. I also managed my own financial standing. In collaboration with David, I scrutinized everything I brought into the marriage individually, assets that belonged to me prior to merging finances with Renata, ensuring they were correctly documented and structured, legally permissible. This was both deliberate and necessary, as I intended to equalize a process potentially biased against me. The preparations for the gift started. In approximately 3 weeks, it was properly arranged. I desired a complete and effortlessly comprehensible setup, such that no one in the room, not even Renata, would require more than half a minute to decipher what was before them. For over 2 decades, Sunday dinners at Gerald and Donna Calloway's residence in Chandler had been an integral part of my life. Periodically, the family assembled at their house on Warner Road, a property always kept immaculate by Gerald, a retired civil engineer, to the point where it would pass inspection any given afternoon. Donna prepared elaborate meals and managed these events with the same diligence she applied to her busy social schedule. Kelsey, Renata's sister, and her husband Brent, along with their 2 elementary school-aged sons who resided nearby, were regular attendees. Every so often, my college friend Jody, who maintained a long-standing bond with Renata's family, was our dinner guest for 22 years. I witnessed the boys transform from infants in bouncy chairs to debating video games as they finished dessert. Over the years, I observed Gerald's hair change from dark brown to silver. Donna shared updates about the Neighborhood Homeowners Association, and Brent expressed unsolicited opinions about every sports team in the state. The dinner unfolded identically to previous ones. Donna served chicken piccata, Gerald provided his usual insightful comments on Arizona Cardinals football. Brent filled silences with unwanted opinions. Kelsey shared news of her youngest and his water cycle school project. All routine, familiar, a pattern of life that I had constructed and found comfort in for over 2 decades. I'd brought a present, a neatly wrapped box, similar in size to a shoe box, adorned with a crisp white ribbon. I placed it next to my chair upon arrival, and no one mentioned it, nor did I draw attention to it myself. Renata timed her move when the dinner dishes were being cleared away. She waited for that familiar ease that settles in any family dinner around the 40-minute mark, a time when everyone is full, somewhat sluggish, and the conversation had flowed into the relaxed lull before dessert. She waited until her mother was moving between the kitchen and the table, and her father was settled in his post-dinner pose, the tranquil stillness of a man content after a good meal at home. Then she reached into her bag and placed a manila envelope on the table beside my cutlery. Her actions suggested practice. I could see it in her controlled movements, the firmness of her grip, and the slight tilt of her chin as she spoke. "Philip, it seems we need to discuss a significant matter." As I glanced at the envelope, my gaze shifted to her face. A moment of silence ensued. "These are divorce documents," she continued, her voice carrying distinctly, ensuring all in the room were privy to this orchestrated revelation. "I've had them prepared. I require your signature." The room fell silent. Before any could speak, Donna gently placed the water pitcher and asserted, "This is for the better, Philip." Gerald remained unsurprised, appearing as a man who had been informed earlier in the evening, now watching the events unfold as anticipated. Kelsey clutched her phone tightly, while Brent seemed engrossed in the tablecloth. I sat in stunned silence for a beat, realizing this dinner was meticulously planned, and everyone present was aware of the situation. 22 years with the family, I dined on Sundays. A gathering orchestrated without my awareness became the venue for an unannounced performance. She handpicked the spectators, set the rules, and brought the onlookers. In the dim light, I retrieved the gift from beside my seat, placing it in front of her. "I got you something," I declared. The room seemed to pulse like air pressure before a storm. Renata eyed the box, then me. Beneath her facade, a flicker of genuine emotion emerged. She couldn't decipher me then, nor could she after 22 years when I kept my feelings hidden. "What is this?" she asked. I simply replied, "Open it." No one uttered a word as Gerald stiffened and Donna sat back down. Kelsey placed her phone on her lap, silencing Brent's conversation. Renata reached for the box and untied the bow, lifting its lid. Inside were clearly labeled folders containing meticulous work compiled over 6 weeks, as evident by the complete documentation I had prepared. The first folder held every financial transfer, withdrawal, and transaction, all dated and correlated with account statements. A summary sheet, created by my forensic financial specialist, detailed the total, $42,315, and methodology across 16 transactions spanning 4 months, each amount calculated to elude standard detection thresholds. The second folder contained a letter from David Kincaid, written in clear and unequivocal legal language. This document outlined the financial activities implications, for the divorce proceedings she had recently initiated. Phrases such as dispersal of matrimonial assets, phrases like discovery, and phrases like forensic accounting testimony. The third file consisted of a solitary printed page, a screenshot of the email preview I had previously viewed on her laptop 6 weeks ago, time-stamped and archived. Beneath it, a brief summary paragraph suggesting the existence of further documentation. Documentation that would be presented in court during the legal process she had just initiated formally. Renata's face became completely immobile. It wasn't the calm stillness of someone at ease. It was the stillness of someone who has entered a room and found everything out of place. She closed the box lid. She placed her hands flat on the table. She remained silent for a considerable duration. "What is it?" her mother inquired, leaning forward. "Renata, what's in the box?" Renata glanced at me, revealing an authentic emotion that hadn't been seen for a long while, neither the rehearsed warmth nor the deliberate distance. Instead, it was raw and unplanned, slightly imbalanced. "When did you?" I began. "I'm a forensic accountant," I explained, keeping my voice low. "That's what I do." Gerald spoke first, asking, "Renata, what's this about?" She replied, "It's complex, Dad." Her father studied her with the gaze of a man reconsidering something he thought he already grasped. Donna retrieved the cover sheet from the box, the page that had partially slipped out when Renata closed it. She read it intently, knowing she was handling something significant but uncertain of its meaning. I took the manila envelope in my hand, maintaining composure without opening it. "I'll affix my signature when my attorney verifies that all financial aspects are accurately represented in the proceedings, which will be the case from now on," I stated. I rose from the table, expressing my appreciation to Donna for the dinner, acknowledging her skillful chicken piccata had nothing to do with the current situation, and my gratitude was sincere. I gave a nod to Gerald without speaking further to Kelsey, Brent, or Renata, and departed. My journey home followed the 101 freeway northwards, past Scottsdale's lights, through the expanse where the highway widens and darkness envelops the desert on both sides, and the Phoenix sky underwent its usual transformation at that hour, deepening from a vibrant orange to lavender. A sight tourists come here expressly to witness, yet one locals cease to notice amidst constructing their lives. That night I noticed it. I appreciated it in a way I hadn't for years. The following day, David Kincaid submitted documents on my behalf. What followed was not straightforward. Divorce is never straightforward. Only those unfamiliar or unscathed have declared otherwise. Regardless, we navigated ours meticulously. The paperwork was valid, all-encompassing. The financial forensics report surfaced at the opportune moment. The $42,000 issue was dealt with correctly and according to Arizona law. We successfully portrayed a complete picture of our joint marital assets rather than the incomplete one Renata intended to present. Trevor Elmore's name emerged in a formal deposition before fading from view. His predicament was not my business, and I showed no interest in changing that. I was preoccupied enough. David proved methodical and patient, exactly the type of attorney needed for a process where steadfastness is essential and haste is unwarranted. The distribution of assets was handled ethically on our part, backed by ample documentation as well. The Scottsdale property was sold within 6 weeks due to the unyielding character of the Phoenix real estate market, and the equitable division mirrored the precise financial portrait of our marriage. 17 years of crafting, something culminated into a pile of final decrees and a mutual agreement between lawyers in a North Central Avenue conference room in Phoenix. That is all it amounts to. That is always what it boils down to. I relocated to an apartment in Arcadia while the house was in escrow. Top-tier unit on the second floor with eastward-facing windows that allowed the morning sunlight in a manner the old house never could. Situated near a coffee shop at the intersection of Camelback and 44th, I could reach it within 7 minutes. I began visiting there daily. I would select a corner table with my coffee and laptop, and I engaged in an activity I've rarely mastered, staying stationary. I am not inherently a sedentary individual. My job and character make such behavior unlikely as I systematically approach problems, constructing cases and building structures, arguments, and following evidence trails from source to destination. Unlike idling in a coffee shop corner, contemplating the shift of morning light and wondering about life's next chapter, I did this for roughly 3 months, an experience I am content I had. My reflections were not what I anticipated. They centered around the genuine aspects. The years shared with Renata before any turmoil or cooling of our bond. The mornings in the Scottsdale house, sipping coffee, reading papers while the mountain turned pink in the east. Her occasional gaze at me during those early days, as if I was a puzzle she sincerely wished to decipher. In October, our excursions to Sedona become almost painfully picturesque with the red rocks illuminated by autumn light. The tranquil evenings spent on the back porch, observing the pool lights alter the water's hue, were indeed real. The conclusion did not negate their reality. I pondered over my work too, reflecting on my profession, the instances I navigate, the concealed truths I expose for people who place trust only to be deceived. I contemplated the implication of having spent 19 years unearthing what was buried and more recently opting not to scrutinize what lay hidden near me. I don't blame myself for this. I believe it is human. I think the ability to trust, even when that trust proves to be misplaced, is not a flaw. However, I also believe that the skills I honed over 2 decades are tools dedicated to truth, and the truth remains true regardless of my emotional involvement. It simply is. Eventually, it was bound to emerge. I merely facilitated its emergence. 6 months post my divorce finalization, my forensic accounting practice secured its largest single contract since inception, a 19-year history. This was a financial fraud investigation for a Tempe-based regional bank, a case demanding the precise skills in comprehensive documentation and cross-referenced analysis that my firm has been honing for years. We recruited 3 new team members and expanded into extra office space in the Biltmore area. Details about the case remain confidential, but I can say it's the most intriguing professional task I've encountered in a while. Each day, I tackle it with a concentration born from a life that, for the first time in a while, is clear and uncomplicated. There's someone I feel compelled to acknowledge. Without her, this narrative would lack authenticity. I collaborated with litigation attorney Sandra Okonkwo on a real estate fraud case in Mesa a year before my divorce. She is analytical, deliberate, and her questioning technique dissects situations without making you feel vulnerable. Despite having experienced a more complex and agonizing divorce 3 years earlier, involving child custody arrangements and challenging circumstances, she dealt with remarkable resilience, a trait that lingers when observed. Recognizing the unique fatigue of rebuilding from an unwanted situation, she didn't need to be informed about it. Throughout the divorce proceedings, she occasionally reached out, never intrusively, a text during difficult times, coffee before hearing dates. Her consistent, understated presence offered care without demonstration. It was just there. Following the divorce, meals turned into daily encounters, and they were never hurried. Neither of us felt compelled to impress or entertain one another. The connection that developed was gradual and genuine, the only type I've learned to foster. She advised me approximately 8 months later to start appreciating sunsets again. I informed her I had not been watching them before. She said that was precisely the issue, and that was the essence of her message. People often inquire about Renata. They always do. I believe it's human instinct to seek resolution for the other person, to find out where they ended up post-encounter. I know some details. I know she stayed in Phoenix for around a year following the divorce. Only once during that period did I spot her at a coffee shop in Old Town Scottsdale. We merely nodded to each other, 2 people with a rich past and no pressing present topics. She seemed well. She appeared much like her usual self, possibly more cautious navigating a public area than I had recalled. I'm unaware of the details between her and Trevor Elmore. I never pursued such knowledge, nor did I crave it. Their affairs were their concern, not mine. I am aware that she found employment with another firm in Tucson, roughly 8 months, following their divorce being finalized. This information came to me through professional circles, both our names occasionally cropping up due to the Phoenix metro area's compact professional communities despite its large physical dimensions. Whether her move was voluntary or necessitated, I honestly cannot say. 2 months post-divorce proceedings, Gerald emailed me in a reserved manner, typical of his era, preferring restraint over open emotional expression. He mentioned he hadn't been given the full story before our dinner. What he was told and what followed were discrepant, he admitted. He apologized. I acknowledged his message sincerely. Respect for Gerald has always been there. Donna never contacted me, an unsurprising turn of events, as I don't blame her. Some individuals cling to their constructed narratives, unable or unwilling to pay the price of rewriting them, human nature at its best. 6 months later, after everything was finalized, Kelsey texted me on my birthday. Traditionally direct, She opted for honesty instead of indirectness in our family. I responded promptly to her message. Since our brief correspondence, we've exchanged a few messages. It might seem insignificant, but anything is preferable to nothing. There's one more thing I need to express, and it's the most crucial point, the one that occupied my thoughts during those 3 mornings with coffee at Arcadia Cafe. When Renata placed that envelope on the dinner table, she thought she was dictating the storyline. She meticulously arranged the setting, filling it with an audience who were informed and ready, carefully choosing the moment when she believed she held all the cards. She had the documents, the witnesses, and the script. What she lacked, however, was the box. Yet here's what I want you to grasp, as this is the lesson that required me 3 months of early mornings, quiet evenings, and introspective thought to fully comprehend. The box was not the focus. The box was simply evidence. The box was facts neatly organized in labeled folders. The box symbolized truth, a constant entity irrespective of my possession. The pivotal event, altering the course of everything, transpired weeks prior to that dinner. It occurred one morning as I sat at my kitchen island, sipping cold coffee, opting not to retaliate, but plan, remain patient, and trust in the methodical pursuit of truth rather than the impulsive act of wound provocation that was still healing. Throughout my career, I have trusted that truth, meticulously recorded and honestly presented, is more effective than any emotional conflict. This belief has been validated in every case I've handled. It held true in every expert witness situation I was involved in. It held firm in every fraud investigation where the pressure was to act prematurely, and it held steadfast in the toughest case I've ever tackled, the one I never constructed for anyone else. My name is Philip Hargrove, and I am 45 years old. Reside in Phoenix, Arizona's Arcadia district, dwelling within an east-facing apartment that captures morning light prior to it becoming harsh, and I find myself observing sunsets from my office window in Biltmore whenever my work keeps me late enough to witness them, which is almost every night. My profession entails managing cases that others have deemed too intricate to disentangle, yet I manage to untangle them methodically, strand by strand. My team is reliable and the work meaningful, while my life, for the first time in an extended period I'm reluctant to quantify, feels genuinely mine. Sandra, who comprehends the true expense of beginning anew, has never hinted that I should have progressed further along any stage of the process than I currently am. From my office window, I observe Camelback Mountain, a constant presence in the evening's gloom, the same mountain that bore witness from the window of the house I once shared with a woman whom I believed I understood. The mountain stands grand and aloof, unaffected by everything that unfolded beneath it. I bear no remorse for constructing that union. I carry no regrets about the 22 years that were authentic. And I harbor no regrets regarding the parcel I placed on our dining table, or the meticulous 6 weeks of planning and execution that ensued, nor the measured tone I employed when speaking my mind. My education in forensic accounting spanning 19 years taught me that every figure has a narrative, and every narrative can be substantiated with diligence and care. What the 45th year of my life imparted is that this principle extends to people as well. The truth does not necessitate emotional investment to remain factual. It simply is. It was destined to emerge. The uncertainty lay in whether you would catalyze the situation or be swept up by it. At that Sunday dinner in Chandler, Renata had meticulously arranged the timing, spectators, and placement of the envelope beside your cutlery. She believed she knew how the tale concluded, but she was mistaken. I did. I had been aware for 6 weeks. When Philip simply smiled and presented her with the box, that moment stuck with me. For most in his position would have lashed out, confronted her immediately upon discovery, yet he remained calm. He allowed her to believe she was in control, right up until she wasn't, and indeed, that is one of the hardest things a person can do, to withhold the truth long enough for it to play its part effectively. So are you one who acts swiftly or one who plays the waiting game? Leave your thoughts below. Let me know if you resonate with this type of storytelling. And for more, subscribe as there's plenty more on the horizon.